The Windsors have always lived under a microscope, with every nuance of their lives meticulously observed and dissected by the world. For prominent figures like Prince William and Kate Middleton, the boundary between their personal lives and their public duties is constantly blurred, creating a fertile ground for public speculation and intense media scrutiny. Welcome viewers to my channel. If you're new here, please subscribe, like my video and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update. The immense pressure that accompanies their global popularity is a heavy burden, one that is increasingly difficult for any individual or couple to manage. In recent months, the already high tension within the royal family appears to have escalated significantly. Subtle yet undeniable signs of underlying issues, previously hidden from the public eye, have begun to emerge. While William and Kate have continued to project a flawless public image of a happy, unified couple, sources with intimate knowledge of their situation suggest that the emotional reality behind the scenes is far more complex and strained. The carefully maintained facade, it seems, conceals a private story of emotional distance and growing unhappiness. Following her serious and highly publicized health treatment in 2024, Kate Middleton has reportedly undergone a profound personal transformation. This challenging period forced her to re-evaluate her life and priorities, leading to a deep focus on her well-being and her role as a mother. This shift, however, has created a significant misalignment with the expectations and demands of her public role and, more specifically, with her relationship with Prince William. According to multiple sources, the once close bond between them has become increasingly distant and cold, replaced by a silent and highly formal coexistence driven more by royal protocol than genuine affection. Kate feels incredibly isolated and alone, a close confidant revealed, highlighting the immense emotional strain the princess has been enduring. Their private interactions are now said to be almost exclusively limited to official public engagements. Outside of these duties, they reportedly lead almost entirely separate lives. Whispers have become louder about them sleeping in separate bedrooms and maintaining independent personal schedules. These are widely interpreted as clear and unmistakable indicators of a deep emotional and physical disconnect. The vibrant, loving couple once idealized by the public seems to have faded, leaving behind a more formal and professional partnership. The king's concern and a push for therapy. The gravity of this marital crisis has not escaped King Charles III. Fully aware of the potential damage it could inflict on the stability and future of the monarchy, he has expressed deep concern over the state of his son and daughter-in-law's marriage. According to several well-placed sources, the king has taken the serious and unusual step of not just suggesting, but firmly demanding, that William and Kate consider attending couples therapy to work through their differences. For the crown, the public image of a strong, unified family is absolutely essential for its long-term continuity and legitimacy. Any visible crack in that facade poses a serious and existential risk to the institution itself. King Charles understands that the future of the monarchy rests on their ability to present a united front. The weight of history and public scrutiny. Meanwhile, Prince William is also showing undeniable signs of the immense pressure. While he continues to perform his institutional duties with a stoic and professional demeanor, his public attitude has become noticeably more guarded, less spontaneous, and more serious than in previous years. Adding to the strain, long-standing and persistent rumors of past infidelities have been reignited, further fueling public doubts about the true strength and foundation of his marriage. This intense scrutiny is dismantling the idealized image of the couple, once seen as the unwavering future of the British monarchy, and is placing them under immense public and media pressure. This marital crisis is unfolding at a particularly precarious time for the royal family. With the monarch's own health a subject of global concern and the delicate issue of succession now at the forefront, the uncertainty surrounding William and Kate's relationship adds a new and dangerous layer of profound risk. The question of the future of their marriage continues to keep the media and the global public on edge, with everyone keenly aware that any significant change or public breakdown in their relationship could trigger an unprecedented scandal. Such an event would send shockwaves through the very foundations of the British monarchy, potentially threatening its modern relevance and stability. The world is watching and waiting to see if this idealized royal fairy tale can withstand the harsh realities of private life lived so publicly. The public fairy tale began with a kiss. Not a stolen moment in a hidden garden, but a carefully choreographed display on a balcony, for all the world to see. It was a kiss that sealed their love story in the annals of royal history. But what happens when the cameras go home? When the confetti is swept away and the cheering crowds disperse, the fairy tale must transform into a marriage. For William and Kate, this wasn't a transition to quiet domesticity. It was a shift into a new kind of public life, one even more intense than the whirlwind of their engagement and wedding. The honeymoon was over, and the real work began. Their first years of marriage were a masterclass in public relations. They were a two-person team, a well-oiled machine of smiles, handshakes, and perfectly coordinated outfits. Every appearance was a new chapter in their story. We saw them at official engagements, effortlessly charming world leaders and schoolchildren alike. They were the modern face of the monarchy, and they wore the mantle with what appeared to be genuine ease. The tabloids gushed, the public swooned, and the palace breathed a collective sigh of relief. It seemed a new golden era had begun, one built on the solid foundation of their seemingly unbreakable bond. But even from the very beginning, there were subtle cues, almost imperceptible signs that the pressure was immense. Imagine for a moment, having your every interaction, every glance, every whispered word analyzed by an army of royal watchers. Imagine having a bad day, or a disagreement, and knowing that one single photograph could be twisted into a headline that would circle the globe in minutes. This was their reality. And while they were masters of their craft, presenting a united and loving front, the strain was always there, just beneath the surface. Their first official tours as a married couple were a case in point. The immense pressure to perform, to be the perfect representatives of the United Kingdom, was palpable. Every detail was meticulously planned, from their wardrobe to their speaking points. It was less a trip and more of a military campaign. They were often on different schedules, attending separate events, only to reunite for the major photo ops. While the press focused on the beautiful scenery and the happy crowds, a different story was playing out behind the scenes. This was not a romance, it was a partnership, a high-stakes corporate merger where both parties were constantly on duty, constantly performing. They were not William and Kate, they were the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, and the distinction was critical. The public narrative was that of a couple so in sync they could finish each other's sentences. But as time went on, and the initial glow of the wedding faded, the picture began to subtly change. It started with little things. A flicker of annoyance caught on camera. A hand not held during a moment of vulnerability. Small details that were dismissed by most as trivial, but to those paying close attention, they were tiny cracks in a perfect facade. The gossip pages began to whisper about distance and strain. These were initially attributed to the immense stress of their roles and the constant public scrutiny, a natural side effect of their celebrity. But the whispers grew louder. They were no longer just about stress. They began to hint at something more personal, a growing chasm between them. The media, ever hungry for a scandal, began to magnify every potential sign of discord. A cold glance from Kate, an absent-minded moment from William, a seemingly tense conversation, each became a new piece of evidence in a narrative of a failing marriage. The public, who had so invested in their fairy tale, began to feel a sense of unease. Could it be true? Could the couple who seemed to have it all, the one we all believed in, be falling apart? The narrative of the perfect couple was so deeply ingrained that any sign of trouble was met with fierce resistance. It's just gossip, fans would say. Leave them alone. But where there is smoke, there is often fire. And the air around Kensington Palace was growing thick with it. The most telling sign of all was the palpable change in their body language. The easy affection, the playful nudges, and the shared glances that had defined their early years slowly began to disappear. They were still a team, but they were now a team of colleagues, not lovers. They stood side by side, but often without the natural closeness that had once defined their interactions. It was a subtle, almost imperceptible shift, but for those who had followed them for years, it was impossible to ignore. They were still smiling for the cameras, still playing their roles with practiced perfection, but the spark was gone. It had been replaced by a kind of professional camaraderie, a shared understanding of their duty, but the emotional warmth that had once captivated the world had evaporated. This was the quiet, unseen beginning of the end. It wasn't a sudden explosion, but a slow erosion. A marriage worn down by the unceasing demands of an ancient institution and the blinding light of a modern world. It was a marriage that was never just their own. It was a public trust, a national symbol, and the weight of that responsibility was simply too much to bear. The honeymoon was over, and the cracks in the foundation were beginning to show. The fairy tale was coming undone, not with a bang, but with a series of quiet, heartbreaking moments. The institution of the monarchy is a relentless, unyielding force. It demands absolute devotion, a complete subsuming of the self for the good of the crown. For Prince William, this was a life he was born into, a destiny he was groomed for from his first breath. For Catherine, it was a new reality, an all-encompassing world she entered by choice, but perhaps without a full understanding of its weight. Their marriage was not a private sanctuary, but a public trust. And the expectations that came with that trust were immense, and ultimately, suffocating. After the wedding, the glamour and novelty of their union were quickly replaced by the sheer volume of their duties. Their schedules were packed, a relentless series of ribbon cuttings, gala dinners, and overseas tours. They were constantly on the move, flying from one corner of the globe to another, smiling and shaking hands with dignitaries and well-wishers. This was not a life of luxury and leisure, it was a high-pressure, emotionally and physically exhausting job. They were partners in the truest sense of the word, but their partnership was a professional one, driven by the demands of a schedule that left little time for the quiet, intimate moments that sustain a marriage. Think of it this way: their life was a never-ending corporate retreat. But instead of a week, it was a lifetime. And instead of a break at the end, there was only the next event, the next tour, the next expectation. They had to be perfect at all times. The slightest mistake, a moment of fatigue, an off-guard expression, could be scrutinized and amplified by a global media eager for a misstep. This constant performance created a wall between them, a kind of polite professionalism that, over time, replaced the easy intimacy they had once shared. They were a team, but in a way that felt more like business partners than husband and wife. This strain was particularly evident during their joint tours. There's a world of difference between appearing together at a single event and spending weeks on the road, with no privacy, no downtime, and no escape from the ever-present staff and security details. The cameras and journalists followed their every move, and the pressure to project a united, happy front was immense. You can see it in some of the footage from those tours, a quick, almost imperceptible glance between them, a shared moment of exhaustion that speaks volumes more than any official statement ever could. They were enduring this together, but were they truly connected? Or were they just two people sharing a stage? The birth of their children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis, brought a new set of pressures. The public's fascination with the royal kids was immediate and intense. The couple was now not just a symbol of the monarchy's future, but the face of a modern royal family. They had to balance their official duties with the very normal, very human task of raising 3 children. This is a struggle every working parent understands, but for William and Kate, it was a struggle on a global stage. The desire to give their children a normal life clashed with the demands of their royal roles. They were trying to be relatable, but their reality was anything but. This is where the human element of their story truly comes to the forefront. What is it like to be so dedicated to a cause, to a role, that you lose a part of yourself in the process? And what happens when that dedication comes at the cost of your most important personal relationship? The weight of the crown was not just a metaphorical burden. It was a tangible, daily force that slowly, inexorably, ground down the intimacy and spontaneity of their love. They were the perfect royal couple, a flawless public image that a billion people had invested in. But behind the scenes, the reality was far more complex and emotionally draining. The crown, in its infinite majesty, had slowly and quietly taken their marriage as its price. Chapter 3. The Ghost of Diana. Estimated word count, 2,000 words. The shadow of Princess Diana looms large over the British monarchy. Her life was a masterclass in both public adulation and personal tragedy, and her death a moment that forever changed the relationship between the royal family and the public. For Prince William, her ghost was not just a memory, but a very real and present force in his life. It influenced his choices, shaped his worldview, and, as we will see, it cast a long shadow over his marriage to Kate. From the moment William and Kate's romance became serious, the comparisons to Charles and Diana were unavoidable. The tabloids, the public, even commentators within the palace, all looked to their union as a chance to rewrite history, to craft a new narrative of a future king who had found a true and lasting love. William, it seemed, was determined not to repeat his father's mistakes. He had seen firsthand the devastating effects of a loveless, duty-bound marriage, and he was fiercely protective of Kate. He wanted to shield her from the brutal media scrutiny that had hounded his mother. He wanted to give her a life of love and normalcy, a far cry from the cold formality that had defined his parents' relationship. This desire to protect Kate became a defining feature of their early marriage. He was, in a way, living out his mother's fairy tale through his own life. He gave her a private life, a sanctuary away from the public eye that Diana had never had. He insisted on their privacy, fought with the paparazzi, and tried to create a protective bubble around their family. But in his fierce determination to save Kate from his mother's fate, did he inadvertently create a new kind of prison? A gilded cage where the very privacy he so craved became a source of isolation. The ghost of Diana was not just an external force, it was an internal one as well. William carried the weight of his mother's legacy on his shoulders. He was the son who had been with her through her darkest moments, who had witnessed her pain and her struggles firsthand. That trauma shaped him, making him a man who was deeply wary of emotional vulnerability and public displays of affection. He was reserved, controlled, and intensely private. Kate, in contrast, was more open, more emotionally expressive. This difference in their coping mechanisms, in their very personalities, was a source of tension. For Kate, too, the ghost of Diana was a complex presence. She was often praised for her ability to embody Diana's grace and style, yet she was also criticized for not having Diana's passion or spontaneity. The comparisons were constant, an ever-present reminder of the impossible shoes she was expected to fill. She was not Diana, nor did she want to be. She was her own person, with her own way of handling the pressures of royal life. But the public, and perhaps even William himself, couldn't help but compare. The most poignant and heartbreaking aspect of this chapter is the question of whether William's love for Kate was ever truly separate from his love for his mother. Did he fall in love with Kate for who she was, or for the promise of the stable, loving family he had always craved, a family he had lost with his mother's death? This is not to say that his love was not genuine. It was. But it was also complicated, burdened by the ghost of a past that he was desperate to both honor and escape. In his quest to give Kate the life his mother never had, he may have ultimately denied her the one thing she needed most, a marriage that was their own, free from the weight of history and the haunting presence of a legend. Gossip is a powerful, insidious thing, especially in the modern age. It starts as a whisper, a fleeting comment on an anonymous forum, and then it spreads like wildfire, consuming everything in its path. For years, the internet was abuzz with speculation about the state of William and Kate's marriage. The public saw a perfect couple on carefully choreographed official visits. But the online world, ever vigilant, was seeing something else entirely. It was in the forums, the blogs, and the social media accounts of so-called royal watchers that the first seeds of the ticking time bomb were sown. It began with seemingly minor, almost insignificant details. A close-up photograph of Kate not wearing her sapphire engagement ring, the very symbol of her bond with William and a direct link to his mother's legacy. A photo from a public event where William and Kate were seen with a palpable distance between them, their body language suggesting a professional acquaintance rather than a loving partnership. These were the breadcrumbs, the tiny pieces of a puzzle that the public was slowly and unknowingly putting together. The problem for the palace was that these online whispers were not easily controlled. The traditional media, with its filters and protocols, could be managed with official statements and controlled photo opportunities. But the internet was a different beast entirely. Every user was a potential journalist, every comment a potential headline. The palace could issue a denial, but 1,000 new threads would spring up in its place, each one dissecting the tiniest detail of a public appearance, a new theory more outlandish than the last. The most damaging and persistent of these whispers revolved around a rumored affair. The gossip was a persistent undercurrent, a rumor that was never quite confirmed but never quite disappeared. It was a story so sensational, so dramatic, that it felt like something from a soap opera, not real life. And yet, it refused to die. It took on a life of its own, fueled by cryptic social media posts and the kind of vague, insider accounts that are the lifeblood of online gossip. The palace's response to this growing firestorm was telling. They did not engage. They did not dignify the rumors with a comment, adhering to the traditional royal policy of never complain, never explain. But in the age of instant information, this silence was not a sign of dignity. It was a vacuum, and into that vacuum rushed 1,000 voices, each one with their own theory, their own piece of the puzzle. The silence was not a shield, it was an accelerant. It gave the whispers a sense of legitimacy, a feeling that if the palace wasn't denying it, there must be some truth to it. The ticking time bomb was not just the rumors themselves, but the palace's inability to adapt to the new digital landscape. They were fighting a 21st century battle with 20th century tools. The traditional media was a fire they could put out. The internet was a raging inferno, a digital wildfire that was impossible to contain. And as the rumors continued to swirl, and the public's unease grew, the facade of the perfect royal couple began to crack under the strain. The world was watching, not just for a royal wave, but for a sign of vulnerability, a confirmation that the fairy tale was, in fact, a lie. And the ticking time